Okay, here we go. The prodigal son himself, uh, Mike Macdonald. And I probably should have said this at the top, but let me go ahead and this is another good time to say it. So people may be wondering, hey, there's been these reports uh, recently, yesterday and today, Wednesday and Thursday, and they've been confirmed now by a lot of different sources. When they first came out, I think people were kind of like, I don't know that source. Can we trust it? Well, it's since been confirmed by a lot of different places that it appears that they use these words very carefully and intentionally that the Ravens are targeting Mike Macdonald to be their next defensive coordinator. But we do our due diligence here. Until
Yeah.
there's something official, we're gonna talk about everybody who they've interviewed or will interview, and kind of give equal opportunity and equal time to discuss all of these guys because they've earned that. But so, factor that in as we go through this. If you're asking yourself why they talk about these other guys, we know it's going to be Mike McDonald. That's why we're doing it. We don't know. We think that's what's going to happen, but nothing's been
Yeah,
official.
we don't know.
We don't know. But again, another guy, very familiar with the Ravens scheme. Yes, he was away last year because he was the defensive coordinator at Michigan, working for Jim Harbaugh. But prior to that, he had been with the Ravens since 2014 and on the defensive side of the ball almost exclusively, I believe. So, coach linebackers, coach DBs, was an assistant, started off as a defensive assistant, started off as an intern. So very familiar with kind of that Harbaugh philosophy in the current version of the scheme. Um, kind of cut his teeth back at Georgia back in the day. And another interesting connection, he was at Georgia as a GA during Justin Houston's last season at Georgia. So, a little bit of a connection there. We don't know if
Oh,
Houston's back or not, but
maybe that'll help him come back.
maybe. Who knows? But youngest guy out of these candidates as we go through, only 35 years old, um, you know, seems by all accounts to be a bright, smart guy, up and coming, kind of young coach. Um, but it did kind of catch me by surprise, just because he went to Michigan and was only DC for a year, and I just not that I never saw him coming back to the NFL. I definitely thought that he would at some point. Just didn't know it could be this soon. So, what do you think about him as a candidate?
So I've did a little digging. Mike provided me with some lovely film for today that I have been watching very carefully. He he's the type of coordinator who is not going to beat himself. And I told you this earlier. It's like me looking myself in the mirror, which is from the games I've watched. I watched a ton of Nebraska because it seems like in Nebraska he had a really good rhythm. He had a really good just vibe of the game, and you can tell he understands what's going on. He understands leverages. He understands not putting people in bad positions. He doesn't blitz very much, and I know our base, the fans here with the Ravens, they like pressure. They like things going left, right, sideways. Guys coming from all over the place. If you watch the Rams game, that's what Mike Macdonald runs in a sense. He lets his 4-man front dictate everything. And his secondary is very sound. They understand their assignments. There's not a lot of weird rotations and guys going in motion. It's the rules are the rules are the rules are the rules. Mm-hmm. So bringing that to the NFL, going to be interesting. I want to see it. I want to see because we've seen it work before, and we're going to talk about the if you want to call Mike the young version, Mr. Richard is kind of the tried, true, and trusted version of what Mike Macdonald is doing. So, which is, we'll continue to go down there. I think you're seeing a pattern. You're seeing as they start to interview guys and who they seem like they're hot to are guys that make defense simple and let guys go make plays. Just be who they are, who we drafted them, not if the tackle blocks down and the tight end loops, you've got to hook, curl, and spin around and tell the corner that you're dropping this way and tell us what?
Yeah.
We don't need that. So that's what I kind of get from watching a little bit of the Mike Macdonald defense in Indiana and Maryland, as well as Nebraska.
Well, I love pressure. I love it when people are coming from all different kinds of places and all different kinds of bodies are coming. But I may be in the minority now. I know you said I don't know if as many people like that now as they used to after what they said. I think people are leaning more towards your side of things now, where they're like, "Oh yeah, pressure is cool," but it got a little out of hand at times with with the guys that they had. So I can certainly understand anybody who feels that way. And again, we'll keep touching on this theme throughout that, there's probably a sense of having to adjust to um, I don't want to call it the modern passing game, because I mean it's been here. It's been that way for the last couple of years, but just that sense that, hey, yeah, you've been here and you've been the coordinator and you've seen the passing games that are out there around the league, but you still are kind of calling defense a certain way against that when the rest of the league is sort of pivoting to how they defend these passing games. And so I think that's kind of a theme that we'll see throughout. So, we'll wait.
I saw something very interesting when I was watching the game against Michigan, Nebraska, and you don't see it very often. Is they played a lot of man on top with their linebackers zoning underneath.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that even in the Indiana game. Indiana game. I'm saying that twice. They like to zone off underneath with their backers.
Yes, and you don't see that very often, and that's that new age modern concept. When you have very athletic linebackers, hint, 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 Dean and Queen could definitely play in a 4-2-5 and be very. I might be out of business talking about those two, but that's another show.
And when you look at those guys, if you look through that roster, Michigan had, of course, people know about Hutchinson and Ajabo and the kind of pressure they were bringing off the edge. But if you look at just the linebackers, and you could even kind of carry this over to the defensive tackles. But if you look at the linebackers, there was a clear mode. I had to look up all like 4 of those guys that were playing throughout those games, 4 or 5. They're all right around 6 foot, 6'1", in the 220s, like down to the last. They can all run.
all tackle, all play in space, all understands getting to the hash, looking for work, all the little things you need to be able to play the middle of the field in terms of pass coverage.
Yeah, and they were just passing everything off, like you said. Anything that came underneath, you're crossing, you're doing whatever. We're just passing that off. And we're going to sit where we're supposed to sit, have our eyes where we're supposed to have them, and we'll match up when we need to do that. So it was pretty interesting to see that. And you probably saw this too. It's this last thing I'll say, and we'll move on. Run fits. I was pretty impressed with some of their run fits because you see what you talk about before, where it looks like a dance. It looks choreographed. Everybody's kind of flowing and fitting off of the other person where they're supposed to be. You got linebackers who have maybe walked out against the formation, but then they're folding back in, and then the safety's relating off of him, to kind of replace wherever he folds into. So I was like, man, this is nice. I like this.
Yes. And it's so funny that he's bringing the 4-2-5 back, because the weak safety is what Tony Jefferson played in Arizona.
That is true. That is true.
And that's the type of player you need there who can both play the tight end up the seam and then be the 220 linebacker playing at 205, 210.
And you remember the first time Jefferson was here with Weddle, that was an issue that a lot of people had, is like, why are they trying to play him on the, in the back end so much? Why do you got him trying to play the deep post or playing the deep half? It's not really his game.
Nope.
So, maybe if he's still back, and if Macdonald is the guy, maybe we'll see him used more in those roles that kind of suit what he does best.
Yep. Totally.
So, a lot of positive things there about Mike Macdonald. But let's move on.
Out with the old, in with the new.
But that was our last candidate there. So we talked through them all. I think this is the time we wanted to circle back before we close out the show, and just any kind of, closing thoughts. You talked about the patterns. I think you flushed all that out, the different themes throughout the coordinators. But then this is where I wanted to kind of give you the platform to talk about, okay, well, moving forward, regardless of which one of these guys comes in, and then obviously when they pick somebody, then we'll get a more clear idea of kind of maybe what direction they're going to go in. Well, probably not until the season starts, but we'll have some general idea. But what do you think the direction should be moving forward on defense?
A less complicated scheme that allows you the flexibility to match up your personnel with their personnel. I think in the last 3-4 years, the Ravens either A, didn't have the personnel to match up with it, or B, chose not to match up personnel in terms of strength on strength and then taking advantage of weaknesses. Because there'd be a lot of games where we would just run the same stuff into team's strengths, into team's weaknesses. It didn't matter. We just ran it. And you need to get on board with this new age thinking in terms of you've got to have multiple game plans going into a ball game. And you have to be fluid with your game plan and be able to change on a dime. And I think a lot of these older coaches can't do that or won't do that because it's uncomfortable. So they're comfortable where they are, so they continue to run the schemes that they're comfortable with. You've got to change the game. The offenses are way ahead in terms of being able to spread you out, dictate them, this, that, and the other. The way you solve that as a defense is you get simpler. Because the offense has to get simpler. Because if you're overcomplicated on offense and I'm a simple defense, I'm just going to wait till all this is done and then find the football.
Yeah.
So the less complicated you are on defense, the less complicated the offense you're going to face can be. So now your philosophy changes on your team in terms of, if I got a defense who's fast, physical, basic, can control football games and manage games, I can turn my offense loose.
Yeah.
Go get 28 points, and then I can go, whoa, okay, go run the football. Now I got a defense who's not going to get into hurry up and literally get obliterated, ran up and down the field, and now we're in a 35-33 game, and we need Justin Tucker to hit a 48-yard field goal into the wind when it's raining. Like, we need to have a level set defensive squad that allows Lamar and that offense to blossom, because you obviously have the weapons in place. Now, you can build a defense if it's less complicated inexpensive and still be very good. Look at Buffalo. Look at the old Carolina teams. You can do it inexpensively in a 4-man front and be very good at it because you've got money invested in the secondary, which is what you need in a 4-man front.
Yeah. And if you've got a scheme that, like you said, is, I think people hear simple and they get this idea that, it's going to be something that people can easily figure out. When to me, that's not really what we mean by simple in this context. What we mean here is that it's something that has a good foundational structure and everybody knows what they're doing, right? And everybody knows what the guy next to them is doing. And like you said, there's not so many if-then kind of situations. If this happens, then I do this. But if that doesn't happen, then I do that. That gets to be a lot. And when you were explaining it, what it reminded me of was something that Nick Saban actually said a couple of years ago. If you think back to Johnny Football at Texas A&M, and then those Deshaun Watson, Clemson teams where Alabama was actually getting beat, he said that he actually had to dial it back and simplify some of his schemes, because you talk and listen to some of these coaches, college football and NFL, and they say he carries more defense than even NFL teams, or he did. But even he realized that, hey, these boys, now they were dealing with tempo there. These boys are running up and down the field, and we ain't got time for all these dual calls. And then,
just like what Ed Reed was talking about. Yeah, like what Ed Reed was talking about in the article we were talking in the chats today, is the fact that you have one call, you can always go back to it. And I talked about it all year. You have a base defense you can always go to. Everybody knows it. Everyone's comfortable. You look at each other and go, you hear it in the huddle, you go, okay, I can be free. Let's party. You hear it, you line up, you know what's going on, you know what's coming and all this other stuff. You can just play. Yeah. But if you're sitting there, you got overload on the right side, and you got Aaron Rodgers in the shotgun, he knows the blitz is coming from the left. He knows you got a guy dropping out, and he knows the hole is at 7 yards, either between the hook or the curl.
And he's going to hit it.
Not hard.
Right. It was crazy, too, what Ed was talking about in that example, too. He talked about how that was a day one install for them, so everybody knew it. And he also talked about how he specifically mentioned Ray. He's like, Ray didn't even have to move. He's like, he might have moved 2 steps, depending on if it was trips or if it was slot. So that was it. Other than that, Ray didn't even have to move. So even in terms of getting lined up, everybody knew exactly where they had to be.
Yeah, and then you can and you just play. What game were we watching with Coach Evans? When Clean's lights just started turning on.
Man, we watched the first 6 or 7. So that would have been.
Was it? It was right before the Miami game.
So we were
Kansas City.
So Kansas City was earlier, and then there was like Broncos, Lions were in there. Man, I'm blanking out on who was that. It was before. Was it Chargers? Did we get up to the Chargers? I think we got up to the Chargers game, because after the Chargers game was the Bengals. So I know when.
Yeah, so it was the game before the Chargers game.
It must have been like Chargers, Broncos, Lions.
It was the Lions game because he was just going. He was.
There was a couple plays, where he just went, and coach kept saying, "Look, when he does that, now we get to see his talent. Now we get to see his ability. When he doesn't have to think about this and think about that and get this person lined up and get that person." Because look, I mean, I understand if you're playing Mike linebacker, this part of your responsibility is making sure people are lined up right. But when having to do that is based on so many variables, it's not just saying, okay, you need to, bumping over a guy from a shade to a 3. That's one thing. But when you're like, all right, if they do this, then you got to be over here. Don't hold it up. Their motion. All right, now you got to get back over here.
Right.
That's a lot to put on anybody, but particularly a young guy who really had his first full training camp in 2021. Didn't have it last year. And they put him out there last year. Without all of that. Oh, you know what? So I look back because I wanted to make sure. So we looked at the first 6, We looked at Raiders. This is in order: Raiders, Chiefs, Lions, Broncos, Colts. Maybe that's the one we left out, and
Yeah.
then the Chiefs.
Yeah.
We looked at those. We looked at those first 6. So maybe it was somewhere in that.
Yeah.
Colts to Chargers, where things started to kind of come together. Even though, he still had some, raise your eyebrow kind of stuff. I think it was the Broncos one where he kind of made some plays too. But anyway, be that as it may, I think you have given us the path forward, right?
I hope
to move into this new season with a defensive philosophy that, like you said, can't have 2 gamblers at the table. Right? We got to have one person, got to have one responsible adult at the table.
yes.
You just can't get caught up, because that's another thing Ed said today. Ed was like, hey, when it gets hot, whether it's an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, they're going to go to what they know. And what Wink knew was pressure.
Yeah.
Right. It got hot. He was going to pressure. And sometimes that works.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Most times it doesn't.
It's certainly going to be a lot harder to work when you got guys who just showed up on like a Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's going to make it a lot harder.
Yeah.
So this was a fun show. It was kind of cool to talk through all these different candidates. It hasn't been a tremendous amount of change at the coordinator position in a couple of years now. You have to go back to Marty and DP. So it's kind of exciting in a way. I mean, I look, there's part of me that's always going to like Wink. I don't have any animosity. I don't have any hard feelings to what he was as a defensive coordinator. Just it was just time to kind of go in a different direction, as they said. So it is what it is. That's part of the business. But like I said, this was fun. We appreciate everybody for listening, tapping in, subscribing. We'll be, like I said, we'll be touching base throughout the postseason, doing a couple different things. We still got to do that Devin Lloyd and N'Kobe Dean thing. That's the one. I got a list of stuff, and that's the thing that keeps slipping, because then I think about something else, and then I forget about that. But that one's going to be a fun one too, because just watching those dudes run around, that is some fun stuff.
I look forward to that.
So we'll get to those guys, but as usual, thanks to everybody. We appreciate you for tapping in with us. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and hey, be cool out there. Be safe out there, right? Don't get it twisted. We're still in a pandemic, so be cool out there. Be safe out there, and until next time, we get at you.